Hi, NA. I'm Noah Cerimele. I'm joined today with
Jacob Clarkson.
And we are joined today with one of NA's most illustrious alums who was gracious enough to share his time with us here on Christmas Eve, Mr. Mark Donovan. Thank you for joining us again today.
Thank you. Good to see you guys. Go ahead.
So we have a list of questions here. Some are fun, some are definitely about North Allegheny. So we're going to start off. Can you tell us a little bit how you got from North Allegheny to now president of the Kansas City Chiefs and any big moments along the way?
Yeah, long, windy road, that's for sure. NA was a big part of, obviously, the foundation and the things I learned there. Also, just great experiences. So, graduated from NA, was fortunate enough to go to Brown University, where I played football, and great 4 years at Brown. Always wanted to work in sports, but coming out of Brown, I really couldn't afford to work in sports. It was one of those industries where you're basically asked to work for free for a while. And so I went to work in a management consulting firm in Boston, Massachusetts, and did that for about 4 years. And then finally decided I really wanted to get back into what I loved, which was sports. Always wanted to end up in football somehow, some way. But took a windy path to get there. So I left consulting, went to an agency in Chicago, did a bunch of event work around Ryder Cup and the NCAA Final Four and the NBA All-Star Game. And then a buddy of mine from college and I started an agency in Atlanta right around the time of the Olympics in '96. So I did Olympics work there and then did NASCAR work, got involved with the sport of motorsports.
That's cool.
And then got my big break and went to work for the NHL. I actually worked in the NHL in New York for the league office. Did that for a couple of years and then got hired by the NFL. And honestly thought I was done. Like I had the NFL Shield on my card. I was working for the National Football League and figured I would just stay there forever. And about 4 years into that, the Philadelphia Eagles called and asked if I'd come down and run their business, the business side of the team. So I did that in 2003. Andy Reid was there in '99, so I got to work with Andy for about 6 seasons, and then got another phone call from Clark Hunt, the chairman of the Kansas City Chiefs, and left the Eagles and went to the Chiefs, and it's been 16 years since I've been with the Chiefs.
Wow.
You mentioned you always wanted to be in football. Do you think playing throughout your childhood and sort of into your adolescence played a role in you wanting to work there? And do you think that helped you playing at Brown, helped you get a spot somewhere along the road?
I do. I think, I fell in love with football in Pittsburgh. It's hard not to in this town, especially in the 80s. And everything the football represented, right? It's part of the culture of this town. So it was something that I really fell in love with and was fortunate enough to utilize playing football to get a really good education at Brown. I talk a lot to young athletes about their opportunities and, all of us at that point have the dream of playing professionally. But really one of the things I learned early on was you could use that to position yourself. And it creates opportunities for you. It created the opportunity for me to go to an Ivy League school. And then I think the other thing that football really taught me was the core fundamental values that I still use to this day. Perseverance, resilience, the ability to overcome obstacles, accountability for your teammates.
Yeah, for sure.
And I, thinking back, getting ready for today, I just think about all those teammates and coaches at NA who were such a big part of not only the experiences we had together, but also giving me the confidence to know that no matter what was in your way, you could overcome that. And the teams at NA at that time were some of the most successful teams, and we had to overcome a lot of things. And those are the fundamental lessons I learned from football, and it really serves me even to today.
So you played football at NA, you went to NA. Has being an NA grad affected you in any memorable ways? Have you built upon that in any strange ways or anything?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that it's great to be back here. Every time I come back to play the Steelers, even with the Eagles or with the Chiefs, it's always special to come home. I'll go back to football being part of this town. I mean, the Rooney family have been such an inspiration. I remember growing up, Mr. Rooney was like everybody's third grandfather. Like they were you felt like you were part of the Steeler family. And I still recall that to this day. Now it's kind of a humbling experience when Mr. Rooney comes up and says, "Hi, Mark."
Yeah.
Right?
That's
It's
an awesome
pretty
feeling.
cool to be in that sphere and have those relationships. So yeah, NA played a big part of that.
Yeah, kind of like a full circle moment also. And you talked about like football always being a big part about your childhood. Were you ever a Steelers fan? Was that kind of like instilled in you from a young age? And if you ever were, when did you have to transition away from that?
Yeah, so I was a sort of a strange NFL fan. So now I was spoiled. The Steelers were winning Super Bowls every couple of years as I was growing up from my 10 years old on. I actually became a fan of the NFL, and I became a really big fan of Monday Night Football.
Okay.
That was my thing. Like every Monday, I'd go sit in front of the TV. I remember my dad had a rule: you could watch to the first quarter, and then you had to go to bed because you had school the next day, right?
Yeah.
So about the end of the first quarter, I would lay on my belly right in front of the TV. He'd sit on the couch behind me. And at that point, I would just stop moving, and I wouldn't move again. Because if I moved, he'd say, "What are you still doing up?"
Yeah.
Sometimes I got to halftime, and sometimes I got to the third quarter before he kicked me and said, "Go to bed." But I was always a big fan of watching the best in the NFL. And Monday Night Football was always the showcase game. So you saw the best quarterbacks and the best teams play. So that's really how I grew my fandom in the NFL. And to your point on full circle, it was surreal for me when I got to the NFL. It's like, okay, I've made it. I'm going to stay here forever. But as you go through your career, you realize, you're always looking at opportunities and you're always looking for areas that you can grow. And I felt like I'd worked for 2 different leagues. And I felt like if I could work for a club or a franchise, I could learn the other side of the business. And it's been one of the biggest decisions I made to leave the league office and go to Philadelphia. It was a great 6 years there. It's been an even better 16 years with the Chiefs.
Yeah. So being a quarterback and playing at Brown and playing in high school, was your dream to always go and play in the NFL, or did you always have a side thought or a main thought of working in sports or being what you are now, a business side of it?
Yeah, so when you're growing up, especially at NA at the time, there were so many great athletes who played before me that inspired me. And one of them was Greg Garrity. Greg was a wide receiver for Penn State. I still remember I kind of got assigned it, and I kind of was really happy that I got it. But my high school number was 19, which was Greg's number with Penn State. And so I sort of tried to emulate all his success, right? Tried to learn from that. And there were other athletes at NA at the time that I followed in basketball and even in track. But I felt like, if he could do it, I could do it, right? So he was a great model for me because Greg had a long NFL career.
Yeah.
Again, full circle moment. I graduated from Brown and I signed a free agent deal with the New York Giants.
Yeah.
And if you're a free agent, you spend a lot of time by yourself, just trying to figure out how can I make this team. And I came back to Pittsburgh the summer after my senior year, and I worked out at NA's field. So I'd go up there with a bag of balls and a net, and I would just throw balls into a net. So one day I'm throwing balls, and all of a sudden these 2 big SUVs pull up, and out walks Mark Malone, the starting quarterback for the Steelers, and Greg Garrity, and a free agent tight end for the Eagles.
Wow.
And they're like, "Hey, what are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm just throwing, getting ready. I played here." And obviously I knew Greg, so I was like, "Oh my gosh, it's Greg Garrity, right?"
Yeah.
They're like, "Well, throw with us." So I literally spent the rest of the summer, twice a week up there with Mark Malone and Greg Garrity and this tight end from the Eagles, throwing balls, just getting ready for camp, which is a surreal experience again. But then I got to the Giants. I was there in 89, 87, 88, 89, that sort of time frame. And you had Phil Simms and Jeff Hostetler and a guy named Jeff Rutledge, Lawrence Taylor and Bill Parcells and Bill Belichick. And so it was sort of a dream come true, but it was also a realization that the numbers don't lie. And I sort of figured out that I probably wasn't going to make the team. And I fell back on my Brown education and said, I sort of lived my dream. This has been great, but I was ready to go to work. And I knew because I chose Brown, I could fall back on that education and go start my career.
You mentioned work.
Yeah.
So with your job, obviously we're here on Christmas Eve. Does it ever get hard kind of trying to manage working on these holidays? Like, Christmas, Thanksgiving, etc. Like, does it ever get like disheartening having to work such days?
Yeah, I don't know if it's disheartening. It's definitely a challenging job, right? It's a challenging career. I talk a lot to my staff. We have 400 or so employees, and they're all working on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day too. And I just think it takes a special person to realize that you're part of this journey that we're on, and you're going to have a lot of things that are unbelievably beneficial to you. I mean, the opportunity to work for the Chiefs or any National Football League team gives you opportunities, right? So sometimes you're going to have challenges too. And one of those challenges is our schedule, especially this week. But everybody on our organization is working. And so for me, it's, as the president of the organization, it's more about leadership. It's more about, we're going to do the extra things, and I'm going to do them just as much as an accountant or a ticket seller or a marketing person or someone at stadium operations, because we're all part of this together. So, the good thing about our careers, and it's also a bad thing about our careers, is your success is judged every week, right? So there are a lot of days, you lose a tough game and all of a sudden talk radio's talking about firing you or getting rid of the organization, making all the changes, right? Yeah. And then there are days where, you get to stand up on a stage and hold the Lombardi trophy. Yeah. So they both sort of weigh each other out, but the opportunity to at least have that chance is why I think the people who work in an organization and the people who work in sports are a little bit different, and they're a little bit special because they know there's something bigger.
So going off that, I mean, the Chiefs have been one of the most successful teams of the last 15 years, and you've been here for 16 years, so some of that can be credited to you up top in the business side. What are some of the key ingredients and key factors to running such a successful organization?
Yeah, I think first and foremost is building a culture of success, a culture of respect, and a culture of trust. And one of the things that makes this organization successful, and I think it translates to any business, is there's a true level of trust. We all understand, as I was saying before, that we're in this together, and we count on each other. For us specifically, I've worked with Andy Reid for 16, 17 years now, so we know each other really well. We trust each other. We're in it together. Andy tomorrow has to be the decision maker on calls and plays and decisions on the field. I don't do any of that, right? But I count on him to do that. We just transferred 187 people here to get ready for this game, right? That's part of my job, to make sure that goes perfectly, so that there are no distractions and we can focus on what we need to do and the task at hand. So I think that trust and that respect from the top level of the organization is really important. That bleeds down. When people see, when I need something from Andy, he gives it to me. When Andy needs something from me, I give it to him. Our Brett Veach is our general manager. Same exact situation where, I spend a lot of time with Brett on certain things, but Brett's the brilliance behind drafting Patrick and signing a free agent like DeAndre Hopkins this year. He's the one doing that with his team. I don't do any of that, but he relies on me and I rely on him to do all of it. And I think that's one of the things that makes us successful, that respect, that trust, and that confidence in each other.
And does some of that come from being a high school quarterback, high school football player at North Allegheny? And did you learn some of those values there?
Absolutely. And I get asked a lot about what are the aspects I looked for in somebody who's coming into the organization, a candidate for a new position. And two of the things I always look for are competitors, people who've done anything competitive. And it can be any sport, it can be non-sport, right? You could be the first chair in the choir, you could be a master pianist, you could be a chess champion or debate champion, you could be a great lacrosse player, you could be the captain of the swim team. As long as you've done something competitive, that's one of the first sort of levels I look for, because I think those skills that you've learned and the importance of, especially if you're a competitor on a team, not an individual sport, you realize that you rely on others and others rely on you. The second thing I look for are really good communicators. So if we have an organization and the majority of the organization is made up of people who can communicate with each other and can communicate externally representing our brand, that's something that makes you you get a little bit of an advantage, because now everybody's communicating on a higher level. Everybody's got a competitive edge to them. And with what we do every week, it really matters.
You mentioned with the people you've been around with your time with the Giants or just going out and practicing, you kind of pick up a level of pedigree, like you've made it to the top. Do you think you've instilled any of that in this franchise ever since you've taken over as president? And do you think any of that is attributed to the team's success over the last 15 years?
I hope so. I will say this. One of the things I learned in the Giants the mini camp that I was in, and again, these were Hall of Fame players that I was on the field with. So, the first time you walk on the field, it's intimidating. It's like these are people you've watched, and they're the best of the best, right?
Their whole life.
And all of a sudden, you're on the field with them. The first time LT was lined up on my left side and I dropped back for a pass, I knew exactly where he was, and I knew I had to get rid of the ball really quickly. But the other thing I learned, and probably the most impactful thing that I use to today, is, and I'd never seen this before at any level of my sports experience, every single person on that field had a level of confidence I'd never seen before in themselves. They truly believed that they were the best in the National Football League at what they did. And I took a lot from that because I had never had that confidence. I was a captain at Brown. I had obviously had enough success playing at Brown that I got to the NFL. But I had never seen that level of confidence. And that's something that I talk to my folks about a lot today. It's like you have to have that confidence to be truly successful. Now, it takes a lot of work to get that confidence, but that was the first true example of, wow, these people truly believe in themselves. And I think that's a really valuable fundamental skill and virtue.
Are you close with a lot of the players now, and do you see stuff like that, like personal qualities, confidence and stuff, but also if you are close with them, like who could be your favorite player, who's the funniest? Like, do you like being around the guys, or are you more up in the executive side more often? But
yeah, so there's something about being in a locker room that's pretty special.
Yeah, for sure.
And you hear it a lot when guys retire from the NFL. That's what they miss the most.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's a little bit cheating that I still get to be in a locker room and I still get to experience part of it. I don't have to do what these guys do, which is a whole different level now. I would say that I've been blessed with so many great players and so many great coaches in my career that I've been able to have a career with and get to know them personally as much as professionally. The brilliance of Andy Reid is much more than what you see on a Sunday. He's one of the greatest leaders I've ever been around. He has this innate ability, and Bill Parcells had this, which I witnessed when I was at camp. Like their understanding of individual players and how to drive someone, how to motivate someone. Some people are motivated by a kick in the butt, and some need to be dragged along and given a lot of confidence. And that's something I use today. I've learned that from them, watching them, and I'm able to use that in my leadership style. This team is obviously very special. They're players that will go down as some of the best in history that are playing right now. So as much as they're friends and colleagues, there are moments where you take a step back and say, I'm part of a team that, we're witnessing greatness. And it's pretty surreal to be a part of that, but it also is really inspiring. Like on those hard days when it's really, really difficult and you're flying to Pittsburgh in a cold, rainy New Year's Eve or Christmas Eve instead of being with your family, it makes it worth it. So I really feel very blessed and grateful that I've been given the opportunity to have.
You mentioned the greatness you're surrounded by just every day. Obviously, you've won 3 Super Bowls over the last decade. What's the most relieving thing for you and your staff of you all? You mentioned you brought close to 200 people here just for this game. What's the most relieving part about accomplishing your ultimatum at the end of the day?
Yeah, so 2 stories I'll tell you about our first Super Bowl. We were walking down the tunnel, and if you remember that game at all, it was a big comeback. And by the third quarter, it looked like we were going to lose that game, and all of a sudden we came back and won it. And I remember my daughter, who was walking behind me, whispering to Mom, like, what's Dad going to do now? He just achieved his ultimate goal. Like, he won the Super Bowl, right? And it's an interesting sort of contradiction because it is the ultimate goal. I worked 20 years to get on that stage. And there are days when you think you're never going to get there. But when you get there, it's unbelievably humbling and satisfying. It's humbling because you're grateful to even be in the building, right? I'm a kid who grew up in Pittsburgh. All of a sudden, I'm with the Kansas City Chiefs holding a Super Bowl trophy.
Yeah.
But secondly, it's satisfying because you know how hard everyone in that organization worked to get to that point. So those two words still ring through in my head every time I think about that first one. It was humble satisfaction.
When you've won 3 Super Bowls now, how does that compare to anything else in your life, like from high school, from college, being in the league? And is it the top of your Mount Everest, or?
Yeah, so it goes back to my daughter's comment. I had to sort of take some time after that season and try to answer that question. What's next?
Yeah.
And I will tell you, I've been in the league 22, 26 years, something like that. It's long, it's hard. There are definitely days you're like, I'd rather just go work at an office and not have this stress every day.
Yeah.
But the moment you get back to training camp and the grasses, the fresh cut grass smell, and guys coming out of the locker room and the fans coming to watch, it's this instant, let's go do this again. So I was fortunate that happened to me after the first Super Bowl, and it just builds on itself. So right now we have the opportunity to create some history. No one's ever done 3 in a row before. There's a reason for that. It's really hard. So again, grateful to be part of the organization that's going for that.
You mentioned just you feel like it's cheating. You get to stay around the locker room, be around all these guys. Is there kind of you can just feel it in the air? I know this team is going to go far. I know we're going to win a Super Bowl. And do you think there's a feeling like that surrounding this year's team? Obviously 14-1 to start the year, just incredible stuff. Do you think that feeling is in the air this year?
Yeah, I go back to that confidence that I mentioned before. This team has that. Experience is really, really valuable. Experience in playoff games. If you go through the history of this organization, especially the last 5 or 6 years, if you look at our playoff runs, there's always something special about them. But the first one was we were down 24 in the first half. We were down 10 points in every game in the playoffs, and somehow we found a way, including the Super Bowl, found a way to win. Last year was a really challenging year. But these guys always had this belief, this confidence that they could find a way. This season's been another example, in a different way. 14-1, but we found every possible way to win a game. Right?
Yeah.
And many times in the last second.
Yeah.
I don't think you do that by luck. I think you do that through preparation, number one. But I also think, importantly, you do that through confidence. We've been here before. We know the opportunity. We know the challenge. We know we have the ability to overcome this challenge. And then the ability to go out and do it.
Do these Super Bowls give you the motivation and drive as the same they would the players? If you were a player or a high school player, do you think winning the Super Bowl would help you more as an executive or a player? If you were a player, do you think you would be more determined to go get another one?
Yeah, obviously this is all about the players and coaches, right? They're the ones who win games. They're the ones who make plays.
Yeah.
Our job is to support them in that quest. So one of the things we talk about that comes from Andy Reid is eliminating distractions. So we try to create an environment and a culture where everything is focused on the task at hand. Everything is focused on winning a game. So part of my job is to help eliminate those distractions, whether they're media distractions, organizational distractions, operational distractions. So that's one of the things we really focus on. And I think that's one of the things that makes us successful.
Obviously, you hold this job of certain, a hierarchy. If there was anybody listening or watching, what would be your biggest piece of advice that you would want to give to someone that wants to be in the same position as you when they grow up?
Yeah, I'd go back to the first question, which is, it's not always a direct path, right? So don't worry so much about your first job or your second job. Worry about being the best at whatever job you're in. I've learned from my time and from my experience that I was given a lot of opportunities because I might have been the first one in the office and the last one in the office at the NHL. There were a lot of situations where the president of the NHL, the property side of the business, which is the business side of the NHL, he would, if it was 8 o'clock at night or if it was 7:30 in the morning, he would call my desk because he knew I would be there. What that did was it created opportunities for me where he knew I'd be there, so all of a sudden I might get invited to a meeting or I might be assigned to a project that I probably didn't deserve to be assigned to because of my experience level, but he could always count on me. And I go back to the experience at NA playing on a football team where you're counted on. You have accountability. Like you need to do your job so that we can all be successful. So there have been so many opportunities through my career where it's work a little harder, do a little more, succeed at the job that you're in. Don't worry about the next job. Succeed at the job you're in. And that'll give you opportunities to pursue other things. I started out working for a management consulting firm. Like there was no like path in my head like, okay, I'm going to do this and then I'm going to do all these other things. It was just do this really, really well and create opportunities. My first job in sports marketing was selling hospitality tents at a golf tournament. Nothing to do with the NFL.
Yeah.
Do that better than anybody else.
Right.
That created other opportunities. So that would be my one piece of advice.
Kind of like once another door opens, kind of like it's like they just fall like dominoes.
Yeah, and they do fall like dominoes because you get a reputation and people can count on you and they know that. So when opportunities do come up, usually it's somebody calling, tell me a little bit about this person. And if that person who's now talking about you when you're not in the room is talking about, you can count on them, they're going to deliver, it's going to give you opportunities.
Yeah, I'm sure you dealt with that through recruiting, like when your high school coach had to talk about you to Brown or anything like that. You just learned to constantly be the best and be prepared for everything.
Yeah, one of the best examples of that was, so I retired from the Giants. Just to be clear, I retired about a week before I would have been cut, so I could say that I retired. And I had to go into the working world, right? I had to get a job. So I interviewed for this consulting job, and they asked for references. So, I put down my Brown professor, I put down a buddy of mine who worked in consulting, and I put down Bill Parcells. Because when I left the Giants, Bill Parcells met with me, and he said, look, you can play in this league, but you also are one of the few guys I'm going to meet with over the next 6 weeks who has an education, can go do something else. If you ever need anything, don't hesitate. If you ever need a reference, put my name down. Right? I kind of remember him saying that, so I wrote his name down on the reference sheet. And I was about 3 weeks into my job in Boston, and my boss came over and said, hey, we never talked about your references. I'm like, well, I'm 3 weeks in, so I hope we're good. He said, no, they were very good. He said, but I want to tell you about Parcells. And I immediately assumed that Coach Parcells didn't have time to call him back. I was a free agent quarterback, the fifth string quarterback in a camp for 5 weeks. So I assumed he didn't call. So I said, well, I'm sorry that he didn't call you back, but he's a busy guy. He's like, no, he called me back. He talked about your high school experience. He talked about your college experience. He talked about the things that he looked at in your college film that made him want to bring you into camp. And he talked about your effort at camp. Like for me, it was like I was in shock. And full circle moment, I was working for the Philadelphia Eagles, and we played the Cowboys every year, twice a year. And Bill Parcells was the head coach of the Cowboys. So there's this hierarchy within the NFL. You'll see it if you go to the game tomorrow. If you watch it, well, you won't see it on TV, but prior to the game, there's this like sacred area of the field, which is the 50-yard line. And the two head coaches go basically and stand facing opposite directions. And at some point, they turn around, they shake hands, and they talk about whatever they're going to talk about. Then they turn around. Then the owners typically come out and say hello. But it's sacred. Like, you don't go out there. Especially not someone in my position at the time. But I'm sitting on the sidelines with the Eagles, and I see Bill Parcells sitting out there. I'm like, I got to go. So I grabbed our CFO, and it's like, cover me. And I walked out by myself to the 50-yard line, and I just stood next to Bill Parcells. And he was looking this way, and I was looking this way. We weren't looking at each other. And I said, Coach, I just want to say thank you. You didn't have to do something. You did something that really impacted my life. You were a great reference. It gave me a great opportunity. And without looking at me, he said, Mark, I know who you are, and I am glad to be a reference for you. I've watched your career. I've seen what you've done. I wish you were working for the Cowboys and not the Eagles, but I'm happy for you.
That's awesome.
So think about that for a second. For me to experience that, it's been a story that I've told many times before, but it's also been something that I do for my people. So you build this loyalty, and Bill Parcells has one of the most loyal followings in the National Football League. The guys who played for him, the coaches who coached with him, they will run through walls for him. And I'm one of those too. I was with him for 5 weeks, and he did that for me. So that's something, that's an attribute, right? That anybody can, that's just kindness. And that's something I learned from him.
It takes a certain character to do something like that for somebody you've barely known. From that situation, do you think there's anything you've taken from Parcells and tried to implement into your own life?
Yeah, just try to lead in the same way, right? He's a very different person than I am. He's his success is unmatched. He's a Hall of Famer. But those are the kind of skills you try to take from others and just learn and try to emulate them where you can.
Mm-hmm. Before we wrap it up, is there a certain game or player that has impacted your life in a certain way, and what's your favorite Chiefs game that you've ever watched? Is it one of the 3 Super Bowls, or is it something from a long time ago?
Yeah, I can't name one player.
Mm-hmm.
I've been really blessed to be around so many unbelievable players, and I've seen things that the fans never see, right? The behind-the-scenes work that they do, their leadership, just sacrifices they make that I benefit from, that our organization benefits from. So the list is really too long to go through that. I would say that it's hard to beat a Super Bowl in terms of experience. I will give you this perspective though. When I was with the Eagles, we went to the Super Bowl in 2005 and we lost to the Patriots. I've been around a lot of tough losses in my life. I had never experienced anything like that.
Yeah.
It just shocks your system because you realize how hard you had to work to get to that point. You realize that during that season, every ball had to bounce your way. Every call had to go your way just to get on that stage. And then to lose it, you feel like you're never going to get there again. None of that's going to line up again. And that's what makes that Super Bowl that we won in Miami so special. Yeah. Because, no, you can. You actually can. Now, it might take 20 years, but you can get back to that level, and you can be successful. And that gives you this, again, I go back to confidence. It gives you this confidence and the belief that anything is possible.
Once more, thank you so much for sharing your time with us today here on Christmas Eve. I was Noah Cerimele.
Jacob Clarkson.
And Mr. Donovan, thank you for watching.